Okay, I've got some components here in front of me, and I'm not quite sure the condition of these components. I have two automotive application starters. One has a drive that will come out, and one has a constant drive that just sits in the body itself. Eventually, once the starter is energized, it will come also out to engage with the flywheel. I'm not sure the condition of either one. Both look new, but I need to actually go through and use some test equipment to determine the function of these starters based on a bench test. So I have our power supply coming from our power pack, and then I'm using a remote starter button with the leads to make our connections. I also have a inductive amp clamp that I'm going to use and put on the cables to determine the current flow. The main purpose of this is determining, does the starter actually have a functional capacity? Because I'm not sure about the condition of these starters. So I'm going to go ahead and make the connections on the first starter. And we want to just take our leads from our power pack and connect to the body of the starter. So out of frame, you'll see I'm going to make this connection, but I'm going to do it down here. And on the back of the starter, we have a couple different connections. One, a connection coming from the motor body to the motor terminal on the solenoid. The next one is the main battery positive connection, which comes from the battery. And in this case, I'm using a power pack. So I'm going to make this connection on here. The next terminal we have is the S terminal, which is the signal line or the starter signal line that comes from a relay or directly from the switch. So I'm going to take my leads from my remote starter and make the connection from battery positive, which is from our power pack, and I'm going to first check to see if the solenoid functions. And by making that connection on the S terminal, and then turning on the power pack, if I hang on to the starter, I should be able to press the button and get the solenoid to actuate and the motor to actuate. And again, I'm not sure what will happen. And it sounds like, and looks like, all I have is the function of the solenoid. Okay, continuing on, we have the connection from battery positive to the S terminal with the remote starter. I'm just going to hold the body again, and you can have a look at what's happening here. We actually have the function of the solenoid, but we do not have the function of the motor. So what we need to do now is move our connections and check to see if the motor works on its own. Okay, now what I need to do is determine if the motor is actually functioning. So I have the connection from battery positive to the motor terminal on the solenoid. I have an inductive amp clamp on here and my remote starter, and I pull the trigger and I'm pulling about roughly around 11 amps, but I have no function of the motor. So I would deem this cranking motor defective, the motor portion, but the solenoid is functioning correctly. So I'm going to move to the next starter and have a look at to see if it functions correctly. So again, I'm going to take my battery power supply and I'm going to connect it directly to the battery positive connection on the cranking motor. Then I'm going to pick up one lead of my remote starter for power supply. And the next lead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just check the motor function. So I'm going to connect it directly to the motor wire or terminal. And I'm going to hang on to it, and then I can energize that circuit. And you can hear, and I can see that that motor is functioning. Now, I'm just going to put an inductive amp clamp on it, and I'm going to energize the circuit and have a look at the value. And this is a permanent magnet starter motor, and it's only drawing 90 amps of current. So next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the terminal off of the motor, because I know now the motor functions. I want to check if the solenoid functions to be able to energize the Bendix into the flywheel. So I'm going to make the connection. And holding onto the starter, I'm going to energize the solenoid and the motor together. And you can see the drive comes out to go into engagement. And now I'm going to also watch my amp meter. The motor was drawing around 90 amps. So I want to see also what the solenoid and the motor together are drawing for current flow and function. And it's around 80. So as that motor is functioning, it's moving this, or pardon me, as the solenoid is functioning and energized, it's moving the Bendix out into engagement with the flywheel to allow the engine to start. So this particular starter motor, and again, based on specification, I'd have to determine if we have the right speed and the right amount of current flowing for this application. But this is typically how we'd go ahead and do a bench test on a cranking motor.